What's the most satisfying time you've caught someone in a lie? Story 1. One time my family's company was throwing a company Christmas party at an upscale restaurant in NYC. We were in a private room upstairs, but it wasn't like there was security or anything like that, so anyone could and eventually did come upstairs to mooch. Anyway, I'm there with several members of my family having a good time, enjoying some food and drinks and getting to know people in the company. I'm sitting at a table with several employees I had just met and two of my cousins who work with them when two guys come up to our table and introduce themselves. They were professionally dressed, were quite friendly. They start asking people what they do, flirting with several of the girls at the table, and trying to act pretty alpha. They asked me what I did, which was graphic design at the time, and kind of laughed at my career choice. So being a few drinks and I ask what they do at the company, and they say that their family owns the business. I take a long look at the two of them, take a sip off my drink, and say, "Oh really, I must have missed you at the last family reunion. By the way, I'm Theodore Company's name. Nice to meet you." The look on their faces was priceless. They put down their drinks and just walked out. Story 2X told me she was sick and couldn't go out with me that night. Fine, whatever. Well, we had previously introduced her best friend to my best friend. For some reason, her best friend was mad at her that night and called me to tell me my GF was cheating on me with a guy named Mike. She even told me what street he lived on. So I drive down this street looking for her very unique, personalized license plate car, but don't see it as I'm driving away. I notice there's an alley behind the houses. Sure enough, there's her car. I go back to the front door, knock, some dude answers, and I say, "Is Mike here?" "Yeah." He's up in his room, pointing up the stairs by the door. First door on the right. No, left. Then this dude just stand aside to let me in. I walk up the stairs, open the door, and there's my GF put her shirt back on. "Hey guys, what's going on?" All she says is what the dude is still in bed under the blankets. She goes into crazy mode, asking me how I found her, how I got in, while this guy keeps saying, "Dude, I did not know she had a boyfriend. Why didn't you tell me?" Over and over, he was a little feller, and at the time I was in the army and in the best shape of my life. The situation was so up that I just had to giggle, but quickly returned to reality and walked out before I hurt someone. The roommate that let me in, even after hearing all the commotion, was sitting there playing PlayStation. I nodded and said thanks as I walked out the door. Edit 3 people have now said that they have read this story here from Mike's point of view. If you have a link to that, please let me know. I once knew a girl who claimed to have brain cancer. She was always using it to get sympathy from others and her and free things, while at the same time drinking and doing drugs. She would go to a party, do lines of cocaine, and drink all night. And the next day, complain on Facebook that her chemo was making her really sick that day. She would always use the chemo excuse to mooch pot off of people as well. Basically, whenever she wanted a free bar tab, or to get out of something her wanted to do, brain cancer was her excuse. So one night, I am at a Halloween party, and she is there, using her fake brain cancer to get sympathy, free things from guys. She is sitting in the corner smoking weed, crying about how hard it is to have this kind of cancer, and how much the blast radiation makes her sick, and how each day is a struggle. Anyway, she gets up to walk to the bathroom, and in her high, drunken state trips and falls. Immediately a bunch of guys in her rush to her aid. Sorry, a side effect of the radiation is loss of balance. This was the last straw for me. I rushed over to her side and told her to stay on the ground. "I have first responder training. You just fallen and your brain is in a very delicate state right now due to the blast radiation. Do I have your permission to help you?" "Yes, please help me." I feel funny, she lies, loving the attention she is getting from the entire party. I point to her, "Call 911. We need an ambulance here now." Explain to them that she is undergoing blast radiation for brain cancer. She's taken a hard fall and could have suffered a head injury. At this point, she starts to panic. "Why are you calling 911? Don't do that. Here, let me call my personal doctor instead. Don't call 911. I calmly tell her and the group of bystanders are mutual friends that she really should go to the ER. Of course, he insists. Long story short, the paramedics show up. We tell them what's going on, and they take her to the hospital in the ambulance. We all get rides to the hospital, and because we're such a large group, are asked to sit in the waiting room. When the nurse finally comes out to the waiting room after her MRI to let us know that she's fine, her boyfriend mentions the brain cancer. The nurse, of course, is completely confused by this question. The boyfriend prods for more info from the nurse and basically finds out in front of the entire group that she does not have brain cancer. Everyone WTFs and leaves, including her. TLDR girl pretends to have brain cancer. Ends up with huge medical bill. Thank you so much for the Reddit gold, whomever you are. This was my first real comment. Story 3. Lube Tech at a Jiffy Lube tried to convince me that I needed a radiator service on a car that didn't have a radiator. He even showed me a pH strip to prove that the fluid had gone acidic. I told him if he could show me the radiator, I'd cheerfully pay for the service. His face when he opened my car's trunk, where most cars keep their hoods, was pretty priceless. Story 4. When I was in college, I had just gotten 2 new front tires for my car. A week later, my back tire was punctured by a nail, so I went to the local tire shop to have it replaced. Later that day, they gave me a call. Tire shop, the estimate to fix the puncture is X. Would you like us to repair it? Me, yes, please. It was a reasonable price. Tire shop also, I noticed that the treads on your front tires look dangerously low. Me, my two front tires. Tire shop, yes. They are at 2/32 of an inch low. This is legally worn down and they should be replaced. I can do it today for X dollars. Me, so you're telling me that my two front tires are dangerously worn down. Tire shop, yes. Me, my brand new tires that I bought last week. Tire shop, oh. Me, forget fixing the puncture. It'll be by a minute to pick up my car. Story 5. Ex-husband, no. I'm not having an affair. Me, well then why do I have 200 pages worth of IMs, texts, and emails with content sent between you and her? Him, I was hacked. Me, for 4.5 years. And why, yes, me, how did the hackers get these 37 photos of you? Him, and that's not me. Spoiler, it was definitely him. Birthmark, pasty fatness, and all. Story 6. This isn't someone else, but a lie I told. When I was a kid, I played hooky from school once, and I called and told them I was sick. I pretended to be my father and used my best impression of him, and it worked. I had duped the school secretary. So anyway, I spent that whole day in town just messing around with some friends who left school during study halls, and I went to get some ice cream. While I was eating my ice cream, when I got a call from one of my classmates, I placed my cone in my shirt pocket, which was secure enough to carry, and picked up. She sounded a bit worried. She told me that my uncle had recently come back from military duty for 2 years in Afghanistan, and that he had showed up during my English class to surprise me. He had gotten the news that I was sick, so he had left to visit the house. I panicked and ran to get on my bike, forgetting that my ice cream was still in my shirt pocket. If he had just left, I could meet him at my house before he got there. I pedaled my hardest, going faster on my bike than ever before. I rounded the last block and was almost home free when I saw him walk out of the house disappointedly. I thought maybe I could fib my way out of this situation, so as I approached, I was prepared to tell him I was out getting orange juice. But who steps out of the house but my mother and father, both ready to surprise their sick son, and wondering how he managed to get melted ice cream all over his nice collared shirt on a school day. Story 7. My 13-year-old daughter ran away from her mother's home and appeared at my doorstep with a bruise on her face. She informed me her mother had backhanded her and bounced her face off the refrigerator door handle. A year later, while in court to gain sole custody of my daughter and representing myself, the court justice asked, "What is this abuse about?" I told him of how my daughter showed up with bruises on her face. My ex stood up and shouted that she would never do such a thing to her child. I couldn't as a mother ever strike my child, knowing my ex could never pass up an opportunity to correct me. I told the justice. When my daughter showed up, she informed me that her mom had backhanded her and bounced her face off the liqueur cabinet. Without missing a beat, my ex said, "It wasn't the liqueur cabinet, it was the refrigerator." Sweet justice. Story 8. We used to know this girl who compulsively lied about the littlest things, so we always wondered if she was lying about other things. Mainly we wondered if she was lying about having epilepsy. Well, she faked a fit in front of a group of us once at a party. She started pretending to shake, fell to the floor, and so on. She then stopped, confirmed that people were looking and paying attention, and then continued. We told her to stop and that she was obviously faking. She left. Story 9. I do IT for a construction firm. We were rolling out 78 iPhones in one day to a bunch of our superintendents and corporate people. Everybody had to sign up in advance for a 15-minute time slot. And I mean sign up like weeks beforehand. After the deadline 2 weeks before the rollout day, we cut off the signups and ordered one phone per person that signed up. The phones were set up so that they'd already be attached to that person's name, number, etc. The sign-up sheet was just a document with write-only permissions. Nobody could remove or change anybody else's name. They could only add their own on the day of the rollout. We have one of our higher-ups that's a little pretentious walk into the room where we're doing the deployment. There are lines and lines of people. He strolls in, claps his hands together, and says, "All right, who's got my iPhone? Well, we don't have one for you. You didn't sign up. We ordered exactly enough. It's only 10 a.m., and we're already behind. And there are lines of people who signed up that are waiting to get theirs." No, I definitely signed up. I have it right here in my calendar. This is the event that got auto-added to my calendar. Look, literally every person in that room knew that there was no automatically added calendar event because the sign-up only consisted of you writing your name on a page. Sorry, the invitations didn't work like that. You made that event yourself. He started fuming, turned red, began several sentences, then gave up, turned on his heel, and walked straight back out that door. Our non-corporate superintendents and all the other field people really appreciated us that day. Don't act like you're important if you can't even follow the simple instructions we send you, people. Come on. Story 10. My boyfriend used to work third shift at a popular gas station on the East Coast. He worked with one of those notoriously terrible coworkers that calls in all the time with tons of excuses. Well, one night, She called out saying that she was sick, that she was vomiting and feverish. Couldn't come in, sorry. The only person available to work her shift was the district manager, who happened to be in the area for a meeting. DM comes in and works cashier with my boyfriend around 3 a.m., who should walk in, but the called-out coworker wasted beyond belief. She bought 2 rolls of Tums and ate one while waiting in line. Waiting in line for the DM to ring her up and fire her on the spot. TLDR coworker fakes being sick, only to return to place of employment wasted and find her boss waiting on her. Story 11. I once had a graphic designer apply for a post using my artwork in his portfolio. Asked him all about the work and the thinking behind the designs before I showed him the originals and the door. Story 12. I have a friend who was a compulsive liar. When we first met in college, he told us, me and my other friends, he was worth a bunch of money because his grandfather was a huge political leader in Zambia, easily verifiable, and that his mom was the editor-in-chief at a top fashion magazine. Told us he had a sister, then a year later said she died of a drug overdose. I confronted him about everything a few months later, and he came clean about all of it, even things I didn't know about. He comes from a middle-class family, and he never even had a sister. He had a lot of troubles in his childhood. And I guess this is how it has manifested in his young adult years. He went and got professional help, and he's doing much better now. He's now one of the best friends I've ever had. I guess maybe this isn't an answer to your question, but it was satisfying to get the truth from him, since we knew he had been lying for months. It's also pretty satisfying seeing him living as he is now, rather than behind all those obvious lies and bullshit. Story 13. Back when I was in grad school, a girl in my group was ostensibly fighting cancer. Sucks, right? Having cancer on top of being in grad school. Advisor was super understanding. She got all the time off she needed, got funding so she didn't need to teach classes. She flew back home to New York frequently for treatment. We all just assumed that she had a rich family. She did, and they had some specialists there that they wanted her to see, until she posted a bunch of pictures of herself at the beach in Florida while she was supposed to be getting cancer treatment. It was evident from the pictures that she was in great shape, not at all what you'd expect from someone undergoing chemo and radiation. Turned out that she had faked the whole thing, and on top of all of it, was using the trips to cheat on her fiancé, who was in the military. Worst part about all of it was that advisor didn't kick her out, and she ended up graduating, but she basically got shunned for the rest of her time there. Story 14, not mine, but a friend was going through a rough breakup with a girl. He packed up and left the place they shared. She called him several hours later to say that she had tried to kill herself and was now in the hospital doped up on antidepressants and painkillers. And they did blood work and found out she was pregnant. My buddy freaks out for a few minutes and says, wait, they would never give that crazy cocktail of medications to a pregnant woman, someone who just attempted suicide. No, they wouldn't. She admitted she made the whole thing up, but said he should really come back to her and make her feel better. This, he says, was the moment of clarity when he realized exactly what everyone had been trying to tell him for the years they'd been dating. Edit, it has come to my attention that doctors do not withhold medication from pregnant women, but they do withhold it from suicide attempts, which makes sense upon reflection. Hey Race, an article about how people rewrite their memories. Story 15. When I was in junior high, I had a best friend, let's call her Kim, who basically treated me like dog. She was always insulting me, always bossing me around. Basically, she was just a shitty little person all around. I don't really know why I was her friend, but I was. Anyway, on top of being a little, Kim was also a raging pathological liar. She was constantly trying to one-up me with these huge, obviously not true lies. But since I was a pushover and she was my only friend, I usually just took it and pretended to believe her. But one day, Kim told a lie and I decided I had enough. She waited until we were at the bus stop with a bunch of other kids and started telling them a very elaborate lie about how she had been visited by God in a dream and was told that she was pregnant with the next Jesus Christ, and that the baby was the biological son of the most popular guy in school who she knew I had a crush on. She went on and on and on all day about how she could now feel this child kicking in her womb, and how God said the baby's father was her soulmate, and they would be married in a year's time, blah, blah, blah. And some of the dipshits on the bus actually believed her, or at least pretended to. I stayed quiet about it all day, nodding politely whenever she started in on her story about how she was the new Virgin Kim. After school, I would always get off the bus at Kim's stop and spend the afternoon at her house doing homework until my mom got home. That day was no different. I got off the bus with Kim, smiled, and nodded enthusiastically as I listened to her jabber on about how she was supposedly inseminated with pedophile God's holy creation. You're okay with me being pregnant with Ryan's baby, right? Kim asked me as we started up her driveway. I know you were kind of in love with him, but I feel like this is fate. Yeah, I'm fine. I said, okay, good. Kim sighed with her smug smirk. I mean, it's not like you're really Ryan's type anyway. You know, he's always hanging out with those really skinny girls, but I said nothing. I just nodded and smiled like I had done all day and followed Kim into her house, down the hall, and into her kitchen where her mom was sitting at the counter reading a book. "Hi, girls," Kim's mom sang out as soon as she saw us. "I always like her. How was school?" "It was fine," Kim said. "Did anything interesting happen?" The polite smile on my face slowly crept up in the corners to a full-on, eating Grinch smirk. "Kim, why don't you tell your mom a story you told everyone at school?" I looked into Kim's eyes and could almost hear the sound of her stomach falling out of her. "About how you're pregnant." I calmly sat in the nearest chair, folded my hands in my lap, and watched as the world burned down around me. I went to a Chicago Bears game back in the early 90s with my childhood best friend and his grandfather, who had had season tickets to the Bears for a long, long time, back to like 1972. We get to the seats, which are in an awesome location, to see four guys sitting in Grandpa's seats. My friend's grandpa tells them, "Guys, you were in our seats. Can you please move?" One of the dudes is a huge and says the seats are his groups. Grandpa says they are wrong and they need to move. To which one guy replies, "Oh yeah, well I don't see your name on them, so off." Grandpa points to the seat back on the seat nearest to him, which in fact has an engraved nameplate with Grandpa's name on it. Same with all the other seats. Since he had the same seats for so long, he was able to get them engraved. It was amazing watching these four idiots stammer and walk away. Story 16 years ago back in school, I had a friend that often made up outrageous lies to get attention. But being her good friend, I often believed her, or at least didn't call her out on them, as she was having a lot of home life problems and was a pretty lonely girl. One day, I had made arrangements for me, my friend, and some other girls from our class to meet up and head off school ground for lunch. My friend became insanely jealous and said she didn't need other friends and she didn't need me as a friend if I would think about hanging out with anyone other than her, and was really vile. So I got upset and went without her. I needed to calm down more than anything. 40 minutes later, when I got back, I found her in tears and being comforted by a group of girls from another class. One of them came over and started shouting that I was a terrible person for going out for dinner without inviting my friend, and that while I had ran off and abandoned her, a girl from a neighboring school had attacked her violently because I wasn't there to stop her. She was shaking and covered in scratches, with a bruise on her cheek. Unfortunately, the girl who supposedly attacked her was the best friend of my next-door neighbor and had moved 200 miles across the country just 2 weeks earlier. This was quickly verified by my next-door neighbor, who went to our school too. The teachers got involved, and another student came forward to say they had walked in on her hitting herself in the face in the bathroom at lunchtime. People apologized for getting at me, but it was no kind of victory. I felt sorry for her. I forgave her after a while. That was not the craziest lie she got caught telling. Story 17, I work for a broadcast camera house. We rent out camera systems to shows, news, sports, etc. A few years back, a client rented a few cameras and some specialty lenses, including one very rare, very expensive fisheye. Nice lens, it's not made anymore, so replacing it isn't possible, and fixing it will be extremely expensive. That was foreshadowing, by the way, so the package comes back at the end of the job, and the lens has a divot the size of a quarter taken out of the front element. I mean, this thing was trashed. I called the producer to have the "you broke it, we're billing you to fix it" conversation. Within seconds, the conversation breaks down to the "this is bullshit, we never even used it, it never came off the camera truck, I can't believe we're being treated this way," etc., etc., etc. Scream fest. Meanwhile, it turns out that the client had also rented a few tape decks. One of the still had a tape in it. On a whim, we watched the tape, and damned if it wasn't footage from the camera with the lens in question very clearly showing the truck driving into it. Big hit too. Truck had to be going 25 miles per hour. I grabbed the tape and went to the producer's office. Let him scream a bit in front of about 10 other people. He's the type that likes an audience before showing them the tape. I made sure to shuttle back and forth a bit, slow it down, replay it a few times, also showed them the part where his name was visible on the slate. The look on his face was priceless. Ended up being a $20,000 repair bill. Never heard from him again. It was worth it. TL, dar, douchebag, damaged, expensive camera and lens, denied it, and was dumb enough to send back photographic evidence. Story 18, when I was 7 or 8, I was all about collecting Pokemon cards. I had a binder set up with the card protectors, Pokemon stickers, my own personal Pokemon drawings, the whole shebang. My most prized card was my holographic Moltres. One day, I noticed there was a scratch on the card and threw a fit like only an 8-year-old scorn knows how. I immediately asked my younger brother if he had been taking out my cards, which he vehemently denied. I started to think that maybe I had accidentally scratched the card, which brought about a mini existential crisis. I lost sleep thinking I couldn't look after my Pokemon cards. Anyway, the next day I am at the bus stop with my brother and my neighbor. When my neighbor starts talking about how cool my brother's holographic Moltres is, I just stared at my brother and he started crying. Then I chased him down the street, but that felt good. TLDR, done with my molters every single time I catch my son in a lie. So satisfying because I get to watch his head spin while trying to come up with new lies and justifications. Not fully understanding that my 20-year head start has allowed me to anticipate every single thing he's about to say, and he should just give up. Story 19, my buddy was dating my roommate. They broke up, which made it awkward for me. Well, she goes all crazy on him and starts telling him she's pregnant, and it is his. After he told me this, we live in a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, I started noticing that the stash of tampons my roommate kept under the sink were dwindling. Upon hearing this news from me, I've never seen a more relieved person. Story 20, I met this dude who wanted to join my band, and he was a huge Pearl Jam and Rolling Stones fan. So I had asked him if he was a fan of the Bandstone Sessions, a band I made up on the spot. He told me he had every one of their albums. The look on his face was priceless when I told him I made up the band. Story 21, I had a long argument, once with someone who claimed loudly and angrily that Pat Morita from the original Karate Kid movies was a master of martial arts in real life. He came up with loads of evidence and even talked about stories of Morita single-handedly defeating hordes of attackers. Then I showed him an article where it talked about Morita spending most of his life as a stand-up comic with no martial arts experience. And he shut up. TLDR, Pat Morita was not a ninja. Story 22, when I was young, I had these tiny magnetic figures, not sure what they're called. So anyways, I was at a friend's house and I had just bought a new pair of them. When I was about to go home, I noticed one was missing. I got kind of sad and asked him if he had seen it. He said no, but I knew he was this liar type of guy. So I searched his pockets. I found it in his back pocket, and he started saying stuff like I didn't know it was there. Must have been my brother. I felt like a detective afterwards. TLDR, my friend stole one of my toys. I went detective on his. Story 23, I worked in an IT department and had the option of taking some leave time as cash. This required submitting a form to my then manager, who had it in for me at the time. After several hours, I decided to take a stroll over to accounting and talk to a fellow coworker to see if she had received the paperwork. She hadn't. I then asked if there would be any foreseeable problem with issuing me the cash. Nope. She said, just need the paperwork. I went back to my desk, and not 5 minutes later, my manager walked by the door on her way home for the day, 130 no less, and told me that she had talked to accounting and said they couldn't issue me the check. Who did you talk to? I asked. Name, she said. That's funny, I replied, because I just spoke to her 5 minutes ago, and she said it wouldn't be a problem. Let's go talk to her. No, we'll go talk to her, my manager replied. And wouldn't you know it, I got my check 15 minutes later. As an epilogue, I had the sincere pleasure of securing down my manager's PC and locking out her network account per the CIO's orders. When she got terminated 3 months later, the last thing she saw as she was escorted onto the elevator and led out of the building was my smiling face. Story 24 had an old 1984 Mazda 626 that had a rear wheel bearing die. Being about 18 at the time, I didn't know as much about cars as I do now, but I still knew enough to tell the mechanic at Canadian Tire was full of. The car was pulled into the shop, they lifted it up on the hoist, and the wheel fell off. It was still bolted to the brake drum. The bearing had just come apart, but I didn't really know that. All we saw was the exposed internals of the rear brakes. The mechanic saw the look on our faces and thought cha-ching as they received a portion of part sales back then. A couple hours later, he calls back and says he has a quote. I looked through the list of about 15 items and the total of $2,600 and immediately called a tow truck. I went through the list and pointed out 5 items that didn't even exist on the car: rear brake caliper, rear differential, etc. I tore into the guy and eventually his manager and told them I wasn't paying a cent for the diagnosis. I got the car home and, with the help of the Haynes manual, installed the 34-wheel bearings myself in about an hour, and the car worked perfectly for about 5 more years. Story 25, ooh boy, do I have a doozy. So, I had a job with this complete who, for the sake of this story, we will refer to as Peter. Peter had not paid me in a few weeks, and I was starting to become more forceful when asking him about it. One day, he handed me a letter from someone we'll call Harry, who purported to be the CEO of the company. Harry was firing me. Now, I had never met Harry, and in fact, when I was hired, Peter told me that he himself was the CEO. While I was fired, but I still wanted my back pay as it was nearly $2,400. I wrote Peter many emails, and he replied by saying that this Harry was not approving my pay. I don't know why Harry had to approve anything, as I was a legitimate employee with a contract, timesheets, the whole kit and caboodle. When I asked Peter, he was vague about it. Finally, I called the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. I set up an arbitration hearing. When Peter arrived, the first thing he said was, "My name is Peter, and I pay my employees." Throughout the hearing, I showed my timesheets, the contract I signed with Peter, the letter signed by Harry that said I was fired, and the host of emails in which Peter states that Harry is the one who is holding on my back pay. Then came the coup de grace. I busted out a final document, Harry's death certificate filed with the Social Security Administration. Harry had indeed once been the CEO of the company. Unfortunately, he died 2 years before I ever started working there, making it quite difficult for him to be the one who was keeping my money from me. Peter was furious. He started shouting and referring to me as this little. He was caught in an obvious fraud, and he was pissed. Not only did I get my back pay, but the arbitrator also awarded me additional money that Peter had to pay in fines and penalties. It was so sweet. I strutted out of that hearing with the swagger of 10,000 Humphrey Bogarts. It was a beautiful day, so I went to a local bar where I could sit outside, watch the girls walk by, drink beer, and eat a lobster burger, which is exactly what it sounds like and is awesome. In 2 weeks, a check came signed by Peter. I cashed it and used the money as the security deposit on a sweet new apartment. Story 26, a girl told me. And our other friend, her stepdad had raped her, and she was pregnant. Obviously, you believe people when they tell something like that because you assume they wouldn't lie about that. She said we couldn't go round to her house for a while because things were rough there and here Mom was going through a lot. Understandable. Fast forward 2 months, and me and the other friend see her mother and stepdad in the shops. Weird saying, as the pregnant friend told us her stepdad had been arrested and no longer lived with them. We confront her, and she spent around half an hour trying to lie her way back out of it before confessing she made the whole thing up. Story 27, my friend is a compulsive liar. She also brags a lot about how much money her parents have. It really pisses me off since my family has always struggled with money. For spring break one year, a few of us went to her parents' house. She spent the entire week telling us about the luxurious lifestyle she experienced there growing up. Even though really you could tell they never had as much money as she often made you believe, she told us that her dad's dream was to retire and drive around random parking lots, giving money to people that looked like they were in need. We all kind of rolled our eyes and brushed it off. As we were about to leave, we sat in the driveway talking to her sweet mother. As we were starting to situate ourselves in the car, she said something about her dad dream to her mother. Her mother started laughing and said, "Honey, we don't even hand money to you like that. Your dad has you and me on an allowance that we have to split. What are you talking about? We don't have that kind of money." It was so gratifying, and that was when we all decided she's a terrible friend and a huge liar. Story 28, this girl from my high school lied about having breast cancer to everyone. She even got counseling from a teacher who actually did have breast cancer and has since died. Eventually, everyone found out she was lying about the whole thing for attention, and I doubt we'll ever see her at a high school reunion. Story 29, not really a lie, but I was that kid who set all the curves in math class in high school, in Chinese, and there were other Chinese kids who sat behind me in class. I don't know why they didn't think I spoke Mandarin, but I did. They would talk on me all the time in Mandarin like, "This stupid kid thinks he's so smart, blah, blah, blah." I never reacted. Literally the last week of class, I turned around and started talking to them in fluent Mandarin, priceless look on their faces. Story 30, long story short, my ex-girlfriend tried to prove her lie was a truth by creating a fake email account and using it to fabricate a forwarded email to me to prove a person and an event was real. I copied the email address of login and tried to log into it. I hit reset password, and it prompted me with the question, gives when resetting a password, complete the phone number associated with the account. I put my ex's cell number in, and she got a reset password text message. That's when she finally admitted to the lie, and in my eyes, all the previous suspected lies. And this was not about cheating at all. It was just stupid bullshit.